Hello, my name is David Platts. I'm an artist, a painter, a designer. I live in North Yorkshire, and you're in a corner of my garden to the rear of my cottage. My studio is just here, so what I suggest you do, you go and have a look round the studio, and I'll join you in a moment. There's work from over 50 years ago and 30 and 20 years ago, which is hanging there. Also, examples of my latest work. I'm working on a suite of drawings. There'll be around about 100 when I've finished the series, and I've just taken delivery of quite a few framed of this series, and I've made a little display of them. So why don't you go and have a look around the studio, and I'll be with you very shortly. Hello, here we are. Made it. My friend Katie is camera woman today, and so we've just managed to squeak past each other. Yes, I was born in 1940 in India, in Calcutta, in India. My father was an engineer. He worked for the East Indian Railway, and He was the foreman there, in charge of the the manufacture and maintenance of all the rolling stock. And we returned to England in 1947. I was at a state junior school on the outskirts of Sheffield. My parents had been born in South Yorkshire, and so we returned to Yorkshire. At that time, there used to be an examination that young people of the 11 plus age, around about 10 and 11, could take to enter the local art college in the art school. For example, David Hockney was awarded a place to Bradford School of Art, and I passed my 11 plus, and I was fortunate enough to be awarded a place at Sheffield School of Art, part of the art college. But my parents had no knowledge of the art world and could see no future in it. So they withdrew my place. So I went into secondary education at a grammar technical school in Sheffield, and I took my O-levels. My parents had suffered quite a lot, and insofar as they were actually quite poor. They'd lost their home, their funds were confiscated, and it was the situation in 1947 in India. So when I was 16, having just taken my O-levels, I just never considered going on to A-levels and perhaps going on to art college or to university. I thought I must go and get a job. I'd done well with my art. In fact, that year, I evidently gained the highest marks in the Joint Matriculation Board GCSEs, and I was given a prize. So art was my main area of work. So I gathered together a portfolio. I made a portfolio, 2 pieces of hardboard, tied together with all my schoolwork, and I had seen advertisements in the press, in magazines, and I began to think, these must be produced somewhere. And so I began to put 2 and 2 together, and Sheffield, a steel city, I went to some of the steelworks. Do you have an advertising department, I would ask? Oh yes. And in a day, through various calls and being passed on from one business to the other, the first had no vacancies. I finally, by the end of the day, I'd secured a job. I was junior artist in an advertising agency in their studios, which was a wonderful experience. I learned everything from the ground upwards. My technique, my knowledge of paint, how to handle brushes, etc., was intensified. I moved from job to job, bettering myself, and finally, in 1960, I moved up to London, and there I worked as studio manager in the studios of an advertising agency. And I remained there until 1965 when I left. I'd attended evening class in Sheffield at the College of Art to keep my drawing and painting up to scratch, as it were, and to learn more. And when I was in London, I attended the Sir John Cass School of Art. Some wonderful tutors there. And towards the end of my time, when I was working, I only worked for the agency 3 days a week. Thursday, Friday and Saturday, I was at the Sir John Cass School all day. It was all, I had the idea, it was all leading up to, I could leave work and perhaps I could now go to art college. I'd made inquiries, yes, I would be classified as a mature, independent student. It meant I could be awarded with a major award, all my fees, expenses paid for. And one relief was that I would be independent of my parents financially, because they were still struggling and I was helping them as all I could. I used to give them an allowance every month. And in 1965, pardon me, I left my work in London. I was ready to leave London at that time. I applied all over the country, and I finally found myself in York School of Art. I didn't know York. I didn't know North Yorkshire. I didn't know this part of Yorkshire at all. And as things worked out, it was the best choice. They responded to me. I was 25. My fellow students were 18, 19. And they geared a course for me. I was doing a foundation course, which was wonderful. I had the freedom that kind of course brought me, but they had a very strong three-dimensional department, sculpture and ceramics, and they had regularly been successful in sending students to the Royal College of Art. So they had it in their mind, even though officially, after 1 year of foundation, I should have gone on to do what was called then the DIP-AD, the Diploma in Art and Design. It's a BA degree now. I had to leave, would have had to have left the college, York, and gone on and done my first degree, and then perhaps done a postgraduate degree after that. But they thought, because of my age and my experience, and then the added experience on the course that they formulated for me, I stood a chance of getting into the Royal College. Pardon me. That was the plan. I applied. It was a postgraduate course, obviously, at the Royal College of Art, similar level to the Royal Academy schools, the Slades, which is part of London University, and I had to sit some extra examinations because I didn't have all the O&A levels that I should have had to go on to a postgraduate degree. However, to cut a long story short, I was very fortunate. I was awarded a place, so I entered the Royal College of Art in 1967 to the School of Ceramics and Glass. I discovered the three-dimensional area of creativity, and I absorbed it and loved it. But as soon as I was at the Royal College, I wandered around the various schools, and I was soon moved to the School of Printed Textiles, because I wanted to explore screen printing, and my work appeared to be still centred, though I'd had this experience, this near experience with three-dimensional work, with the two-dimensional area of creativity. So I was in the Department of Printed Textiles whilst I was there, and at the college. There were numerous competitions sponsored by the college and external businesses, and I was a prize winner in the wallpaper, the international wallpaper competition in London in 1968. Then in the same year, there was a painting competition sponsored by Harrods, the store, and I was successful there. 3 of my works were given prizes, and there was the textile competition, the International Textile Competition of Paris in 1970. I went to Paris to collect my prize. My designs were sold to Lanvin, the house of Lanvin. And so I could see maybe the area of when I would leave the college, and my professional career could work out as a painter and a designer of fashion and furnishing fabrics. In 1969, I was very fortunate to be awarded a Royal College of Art travel scholarship, which took me to North America and down to Mexico. I travelled extensively, crisscross across America, across Canada, back to the West Coast, and then back to the East Coast, down the East Coast, through Texas, finally into Mexico. And that was quite an experience. The day I arrived in New York, I was always a great wanderer around. I did this when I lived in London. I loved walking, doing a lot of walking along the streets and discovering the city. And I was in Greenwich Village. Now, I wasn't an out gay man by that time, at that time, and but I knew who I was. But because of my background, I had been brought up in a very religious family. I was still attending church, so I was in New York. I was curious. I found Greenwich Village. I found Christopher Street, which really is the equivalent of Canal Street in Manchester, and other streets in Great Compton Street in Soho in London, a mecca for gay men and women. Very difficult times then. This was 1969. Nixon was president. Many states in the United States, if you were gay, to be gay was banned. Those are the times. Some of our brothers and sisters, as it were brought up in sophisticated homes, or lived in, you could say, gay ghettos, so they could be themselves, they were out. But many of us were from provincial backgrounds, discovered ourselves, knew who we are, but the opportunity to be true to ourselves would come later. It did for me 5 years later, 1974. I'll tell you all about that. So I was in Christopher Street, quite late at night. It was a Friday, well remember it. I didn't know then the importance of it. Lower down, I was looking at bookshops. There was nearby the Oscar Wilde bookshop. Fascinating to see these books all about gay life, written by gay writers. I was peering through the window. It was late at night. In fact, it was the early hours of the morning. It was very warm, so I'd come out for some fresh air. I was staying nearby in a friend's apartment in Manhattan. Very fortunate. And I heard this rumpus going on. I didn't know what on earth it was. I saw the police arrived, and it looked as though I should just drift away and take my exit at that point. I didn't know what was going on, as I say. Afterwards, when I picked up the news, I'd been witness to the Stonewall riots, which was the beginning of gay liberation and pride marches. I didn't know the significance, obviously, at that time. I returned on the Saturday morning. I saw there'd been a fire. I viewed all this from the opposite side of the street. Quite a throng of people giving speeches, and it was a very strange experience. I somehow felt a link with them. I thought, yes, you are my brothers and sisters, but I can't join you yet. I hope the day will dawn that I can, both emotionally and physically, be with you. So I went on my way, and the next day I was leaving New York. And I'd met up with some friends, and on my way back, I came back about the middle of August, a little later than the middle of August, and they said, we're going to a weekend rock concert. That's all they said. And why don't you come with us? It coincided that I could do it, because I wasn't leaving the area of New York at that time. I'd gone on my journeys, then I'd come back. Then I was going to go down the East Coast. I was leaving the next day after this rock concert. And this rock concert turned out to be Woodstock. So I was there, typical Englishman. I was well prepared. I'd taken my Pack-a-Mac. I don't know if they still make them now, but it was a Pack-a-Mac. It was a big plastic raincoat, thin plastic with a hood, which rolled up conveniently. And I had my rolled up umbrella as well. I was a source of amusement to my American friends, but they were grateful because I was able to share my Mac with a couple more friends, one at either side of me, when the rain came. So we did keep dry. Quite an experience, quite an experience. Never forget it. And so I went on my way after that, down the East Coast, Philadelphia, into Florida, into through Atlanta, Georgia, Texas, and finally into Mexico. I explored a lot, some of the ancient sites. Mexico City was fascinating. The Museum of Anthropology, which had recently opened, was absolutely fascinating. A wonderful trip. And then I flew back. It was after 4 months, the whole trip. I flew back to New York, and then I sailed back on the newly launched QE2. What a trip that was. Still a not out gay man, really. Then my career was taking off. A couple of West End galleries were very interested in showing my work. So it looked, and I was in a mixed exhibition in London, the summer of 1970, the year I graduated. And I also had work in a New York gallery that summer. But my parents were aging, and very reluctantly, in a way, I thought, I can't stay in London. I love to. It would be good for my career. I must go back to Yorkshire, to be near them, to be of help, should they require it. And that's what I did. I managed to get a teaching job. I taught at Batley College of Art, and I also taught at Huddersfield Poly, when it was a polytechnic. It's now a university. And I'd begun to produce the Strawberry series, 30 5-foot square canvases of strawberries, each different colour combinations. I was experimenting with colour. I also was making a statement about modern art at that time. There was a Rothko type red strawberry. There was a Frank Stella strawberry in the collection. There was a Bridget Riley strawberry in my collection. I produced 30 of them, together with a series of hangings. They were about 7 meters long and 1.5 meters wide, of objects such as screw threads, screws, nuts and bolts, springs, cogs, things like that. I had, when I had been in York, I'd done quite a few drawings in the Railway Museum of the locomotives and the boilers. And when I was in London at the RCA, I spent many an hour at the Science Museum, the Victoria and Albert Museum, and the Natural History Museum, but particularly in the Science Museum. And I was fascinated with the steam engines and the pieces that held things together or allowed them to be made, to be workable. The basics, rivets, nuts and bolts, so this is why I wanted to celebrate that. celebrate these vital but sometimes appearing to be insignificant pieces of mechanism. So I did lots of drawings. I did lots of watercolors um, in ink and tone, and enlarged them. And so I produced this series of hangings, and you'll see them in my website. There's a selection of my work from the whole of my creative career. Um, and my website address is davidplatts.com. If you're interested, you can look everything up. So my career was taking off. I had an agent in London representing me. Keep on thinking if I missed anything out to tell you. I just remembered one thing I should have told you right at the beginning. I remember I was always drawing when a child on a slate with coloured chalks. My mother reminded me when she was alive that I was always drawing. But those early efforts, nothing remained, of course, because I would make a drawing in chalk and then rub it out and then make another one. So sorry I digressed then. Everything was going well. I produced a series of screen prints to accompany the Strawberry Painting series, 5 screen prints, and I was fortunate that one was successful, which I submitted the print biennale held at the Cartwright Hall in Bradford. And I shall never forget the opening night. I walked into the gallery and there was my print, and it was hanging by the side of one of Andy Warhol's Marilyn prints. So I thought, my word, what great company I'm in. Things were going well, but then something happened, earth-shattering as it were, which changed the whole course of my life. I was out one night with my students. It was the end of term. They'd done very well. They were going for a meal and on to a discotheque, and they wanted me to join them, so I did. And during the course of the evening, I saw a young woman being molested by a gang of youths. I went to intervene, make the peace, do something. The gang turned on me and beat me up. I was hospitalised. I'm told I was unconscious, had concussion, a suspected fractured skull. I'm told they used my head as a football, and anyway, I survived. But it left such a mark on me. I couldn't do any creative work for 5 years. This was 1974, and I didn't start working again until 1979. After about 6 to 9 months, I was able to go back to college and to do half a day's teaching, part-time. But it shook me so much, something good came out of it, and I'm sure all of us have experienced times when out of a crisis, some good comes out of it. It shook me up so much. I'd left the church. Religion became meaningless to me. I was on the brink of thinking, right, you've got to sort yourself out. And this experience, this incident pushed me to sort myself out. I had no gay friends, didn't know what to do. I turned to the church for help. That was just, I was up against a brick wall. I was made to feel dirty. Of course, they just didn't understand. I was preached at, as it were, and I just politely thanked them for their help. I thought, I've got to sort this out myself. Fortunately, the thought came to me, think back over your life. And that's what I did. To cut a long story short, I was able to think back to now, I was about 3, and I had a pal at school. We used to play with our little cars in the sand and the dirt, make roads, take imaginary journeys together. It was in India. We imagined we were driving to Calcutta, where I was born. And I remember he wasn't just a pal. I loved him. I really did. I felt it in my heart. Nothing untoward happened. It was just the feeling I had. I loved him. And I was looking back in my mind and coming forward. There were other experiences, people I met in my childhood, in my youth as a teenager, in my 20s, in my early 30s. People I met were friends, again, nothing untoward happened. It was what I felt in my heart. I loved the, men and boys, my friends. I loved them deeply. And it made me think, this is natural. Being gay is just natural. You see, we lived at different times, and we'd only become legal in 1967. I was a man of 27. This was 1974. I think I was, I'd be the time of the year, I'd be 33 at this time. So I thought, right, yes, I am who I am. What's the problem? And I got in touch with my mother. I thought, well, I can't lead a double life now. I know who I am, and I've embraced it within myself. I've really got to be honest. So I told my mother, a lovely person, did a lot for other people, and but a very religious woman. I didn't know what the reception would be. And all she did, she put me in her arms. She came up to me and wrapped her arms around me and said, I've always known love. I love you. I always will. You're my David. So all was well with my mum, so all was well with the world for me. She told my father. I was going to tell him, but she said, no, I'll have a word with your father. My father was fine. So that was, by the time I'd sorted myself out, we'd be into 1975. And I discovered Gay News in a magazine shop. It was a newspaper then, a very level-headed newspaper, had articles which featured gay men and women, and also dealt with things that were happening that affected the gay world. And on the back pages, they had personal columns. And I'd noticed people there were looking for partners. And so, to cut a long story short, I'd written to 1 or 2 people, but one in particular I was attracted to. I was very green, insofar I had no experience of what you do, how you meet these people, who you're writing to. Anyway, He eventually replied, and sounded very nice. We exchanged photographs. So what did I do? I invited him to my flat to dinner. And it was love at first sight. And I will add, he didn't leave that night. And soon afterwards, after toing and froing to each other's homes, said, why does this carry on? Let's live together. And that was Nicholas Coombs, a marvellous person, a linguist. He taught French and Italian. He became a gallery director. He was a teacher, a writer, a lecturer, and a marvellous human being. It was a privilege to know him and to live with him. And we were together until he died. Sorry. 3 years ago. It'll be 3 years, the 16th of August, that's just around the corner. I'll tell you more about that in a few minutes. But we lived together, and that was in Brigg House in West Yorkshire. We moved to our cottage in 1985. I had started work again in 79. A gallery in London were interested, showed my work. I exhibited with them, the Brompton Gallery. I finally was with the Quinton Green Gallery in Cork Street, and had a one-person show there in 87. I had entered a national competition, the garden competition, which toured the country. I was a prize winner there, and numerous other things which I don't want to, I've got to watch the clock. Things going well. Living here, 50 miles northeast of York. There was a very good gallery at that time called the Grape Lane Gallery. I showed with them. I had over the years, I had 3 one-person shows there. My work was selected for the Royal Academy Summer Exhibition, but none of the pieces, I think it's 3 times I was selected, none of them were shown. So they were never in the galleries. They choose more than they need, and then they sort of wallpaper the walls. And if they've finished their pattern of paintings, that's it. So my work never graced the Royal Academy walls, but they were selected for the exhibition. I was shortlisted for the John Moores Painting Prize. I was shortlisted for the Jerwood Prize, and good things began to follow from there. I was still teaching, but the work was piled on. I was only part-time. It didn't only happen to me, it happened to others. The work was piled on, and the result was all I should have been was a year tutor on one course, and I ended up by running 3 courses, one which was a degree course, 3 years duration each course. And I became ill, but I carried on. Nick was very concerned. I said, but what will happen? You know, I had responsibilities to the students. But then it was taken out of my hands, I had a complete breakdown. I collapsed in the studio one Friday, rushed to hospital, and I'd had a breakdown. I was diagnosed with, turned out later to be bipolar, clinical depression, ME, you name it, it happened. My body physically all broke down as well. So, like many of us, I'm a survivor. Picked up the pieces, and Nick was wonderful, supportive. This happened in 1990. I wasn't able to begin work again until 1995. The first thing I did was a self-portrait, saying resolutely, I'm still here, I'm here. Began painting again, and gallery in London took me up again, the Sheridan Russell Gallery, and I had a one-person show with them in 2007, entitled De Profundis. I borrowed it from Oscar Wilde. And then a little later, I was taken by the Sheridan Russell to art fairs. I exhibited at the Affordable Art Fair for quite a number of years. But then I became ill and finally was diagnosed with heart disease. I had a triple heart bypass in 2014. I was recovering with the help of Nick. Then he became ill. He was diagnosed with bowel cancer. So our roles were reversed. I nursed him right up to the end, looked after him. And as I said earlier, he died 3 years ago in 2017. I was shattered, indescribable. I nearly ended my life. I had nothing more to live for. And then it was towards the end of 2018, beginning of 2019, a friend who had been a mutual friend of Nick's and mine, she lives in London. She read an article about Friends of Dorothy. An article I believe it was headed the 100 best movers and shakers, something like that. And one in the list was Friends of Dorothy, Leeds. Set up because of the needs, an awareness of the needs of the 50-plus generation of gay men to begin with, and then embracing gay men and women later on. And this friend said, could be worth looking them up. So I sent what was really an open email. I didn't know who I was writing to. And it evidently fell on the desk, as it were, of Craig Burton, the founder of the group, who replied immediately and very caringly. I felt the care and the attention to detail regarding my situation. I told him Nick had died, etc. Told him a little bit about myself. And my first meeting with the group was one of their Silver Sundays, when they gathered at a restaurant in Leeds for Sunday lunch. And I've had a signal from my camera. 10 minutes left. 10 minutes left. I've only 10 minutes left. She's keeping an eye on me. I need to be kept an eye on. For my director and camera woman, Katie. Um, and so my world, I was settling down. I was working things out regarding being on my own again. And it's quite remarkable. This all came at the right time. To sum it up, I have new friends, and I know Nick would rejoice with me. In fact, he would have been very cross if I had ever huddled in a corner, feeling miserable for myself. He knew that would never happen with me. I'd pull my socks up eventually and get going. But um, it's been part of some of the things which have saved me. I have new friends, adding to friends I had, but it's all part of establishing this new life. Of course, in the end, Nick and I have been together for 42 years. How can that be replaced? How can that be forgotten? And but I had to realize the rest of my life was my life. I must re-establish myself and and go forward. And knowing friends of Dorothy and being part of them, being a member, meeting others in the group, going to their business meetings, their social events, has, just to say it's helped me, really does not describe what it's done for me. I had the triple heart bypass, so everything seemed to be well. But then last year, towards the end of, well, the beginning of November, I had a heart attack. I was in hospital again, touch and go, but I survived. I remember the chairman of the founder of the group, Craig Burton, visited me several times in hospital and brought good wishes. Cards were sent, and that helped very much so the healing, as it were. I rattle about with medication now, but I'm still here and I'm working. I'm back at work. You'll have seen some examples of my drawing. The latest work is all to do with this. I've entitled it "The Slownesses and Quicknesses of Nature." I began making these drawings, the first, putting the first ideas down in my notebook when Nick was still alive. When I had him settled for the day, I'd sit with him and he said, "Are you going to draw?" I said, "Yes." And this is the result of those first sketches, drawings, working drawings that I made, and they've come to fruition. My work has always had a close link with nature or with we human beings, and the predicament we face in life. In my, you could call it my mature work, I don't work as a figurative artist because we exist here. I've been making pieces that I hope some are profound, some leave an impression, some are just beautiful, but I hope they're all saying something. They're saying something from my life experience. What you see here, it's not a cliche. For some of us, I can only speak for myself, these are my children. You conceive them, you bring them to life, and then you present them to the world. they hit, they sort of nestle, as it were, in somebody's heart. And they think, oh, that's lovely. Sort of, I can't live without it. It's got to come and live with me. And that's a joyful experience. As I say, I'm still working, and it looks as though an exhibition could be on the cards for next year, after this present situation that we all find ourselves in with COVID-19 has been resolved to a certain extent. I hope I've covered everything. A lot to pack in. I still feel like a spring chicken, a 21-year-old, well, not quite a 21-year-old, but I should be 80 in November. I didn't want to say that, but I'm very grateful I'm still here, and I'm still making the art. I hope it blesses people. That's my only wish, to make things that I've said a few minutes ago, pieces, some which are beautiful, are profound, leave an impression on the heart of people who see it. I'm very fortunate that I can leave something, and I'm grateful for my friends, and I'm especially grateful for those years I spent with Nick. So there we are. You can't ask me any questions, but I'd be open to answer any questions now. It's been lovely to have you here with me, with my children, in my studio here. We built this barn ourselves from the original stone from an old barn that had fallen in the garden. So the stone is all 18th century hewn stone, and we rebuilt it with a friend who was a builder. And this is where I spend most of my time now, working here. Lovely to meet you all. Sorry I can't see you. My website, davidplatts.com, and I'm on Instagram, David Platts Art. It's been a moving experience for me to talk with you. Sorry, I'm a strong chap, but I'm a ball of emotions at times, so forgive me. So for the moment, this is not goodbye, but au revoir. And hopefully see you again. Bye-bye. Hello again, it's me. This is like a short postscript. When the filming had been completed, I realised that I'd forgotten to mention a couple of things which are quite important. In 1970-71, when I returned to Yorkshire, just after I graduated from the Royal College, I came back to Yorkshire to be near my parents, to be of help to them. I was in a little bit of a crisis. I actually questioned the whole point of me being an artist, because I've always had a social conscience. I felt as though I should be doing something more practical and really helping, hands-on helping in the world. And at that time, Médecins Sans Frontières had been formed, Doctors Without Borders. I'm sure you've heard of them. Doing good works, always in war zones, in crisis, centres of crisis, And so I decided to send for all the forms to work, first of all, on a volunteer basis, and then train as a medical nurse. So I was going to give up the art, and that would have satisfied the need in me of my social awareness. But being faced with that, it was like being at a crossroads. I realized people will look at it in different ways, as though I'm being given a talent or an ability, something along those lines. And I thought, well, it actually stopped me in my tracks. And I thought, I must continue to use this. And I can make things which are valid, of beauty, hopefully, profound, as I've said before, and touch the hearts of people that way. So I continued with my artwork. I just wanted to say that. And also, when you look at my website or get to know my work better, there are two periods of change, abrupt change. One was after I was recovering from the beating up, and then later after I was recovering from the breakdown. The one that's most obvious is after the beating up. My work goes back to nature. In fact, I didn't know which direction to go. 5 years of no production of work, and the thought came to me, all I can do is go back to nature. So the first painting I made was of a wood, and then a park, and then gardens, and that ushered me back into the main themes of my work, which then continued. That's the reason why there is this abrupt change. And then again, when I was recovering from the breakdown, the first thing I did was that large-scale drawing of myself, that self-portrait, and then I made some drawings of fruit. And the reason there with the fruit was it was a positive, symbolic image for me. Fruit contains the seed for the perpetuation of its kind, that particular species. So to me, it was a continuity of life, a continuity of life. So I was aiming to be positive. And that also, by the way, I did miss this out. Why did I paint strawberries? Again, they're a fruit. They're heart-shaped. In ancient times, they were the symbol for Venus, of love. And as I say, they're heart-shaped. And quite uniquely, it bears its seeds on its outside. It has no skin to peel away. When you remove the pith holding on to the leaves of a fresh strawberry, it all comes away and you're left with whole fruit. So I love that as a symbol, again, bearing its seeds on the outside, the continuity of life. And that's why I chose the strawberry. So sorry this has appeared as a postscript, but I did want to just add that to my talk. It's been lovely to share everything with you, and I do hope we meet again. And as I said before, it's au revoir from me.